Hi, and you're now with the Forerunner Chronicles. Alright everybody, we're doing this video to prove to you that the New World Order will come into existence. And I said will come into existence. And when it does, of what nature the New World Order government structure will be. You're going to want to watch this video because it's going to be extremely interesting. And you're going to want to share it with other people as well, because we're going to prove this by using history and also the Bible. You got that? Now, before we get directly into the information dealing with the coming about of a New World Order and the nature of its government structure, there's a very important principle that I want to share with you that you're going to need to keep in mind as you go through this whole information process so you don't get lost. This principle is found within the book of Ecclesiastes chapter 3 and verse 15. It says there, that which hath been is now, and that which is to be hath already been, and God requireth that which is past. In other words, the things that have taken place in the past are now taking place in current day society, and the things that are going to take place in the future have already taken place in the past. Therefore, God requires us to have an accurate knowledge of historical events so that we can accurately be able to discern the happenings in present day society and also be able to make an accurate projection, and I said accurate projection, of the things that are going to transpire in the very near future. You got that? Now keep that in mind as we get ready to jump into this information. Now we're going to break this whole thing down dealing with the inception of the New World Order and the nature of its government structure by looking at the most comprehensive prophecy found within the scriptures. And this prophecy is found in the book of Daniel, the 2nd chapter. Now before we get into this vision that is a prophecy, let me give you some backdrop on Daniel chapter 2 so that all of this makes sense to you as we go forward. In Daniel chapter 2, it talks about a king by the name of Nebuchadnezzar. Now Nebuchadnezzar was a big shot because he was the king of the Babylonian Empire. He was the king of the Chaldeans. And at that time, Babylon was the worldwide ruling government structure. Now one night Nebuchadnezzar had this awesome, awe-inspiring dream. It was so powerful that it woke him up out of his sleep. However, when he woke up out of his sleep, he couldn't remember the dream. And this is because the God of heaven was the one that gave him this dream and also took this dream away from his memory. But Nebuchadnezzar knew that there had to be something seriously significant with this dream. So when he woke up, he called for all of his Chaldeans and his wise men and his soothsayers and his magicians to come into his courts. All of these men were spiritualists. And he made 2 requests of these men. He requested of them that they, 1, reveal to him what the dream was that he had, that he couldn't remember, and 2, to give him an interpretation of that dream. But like I said, this dream was given to Nebuchadnezzar by God, and those men were spiritualists, and they could never reveal to Nebuchadnezzar a dream that was given to him by God. Because the Bible says in the book of Deuteronomy chapter 29 and verse 29, the secret things belongeth unto the Lord thy God, but those things which are revealed belong unto us and to our children forever, that we might do all the words of his law. In other words, only a child of God, only a man or a woman that is being obedient to the commandments of God will God reveal his truths unto to share with the world. You got that? And these men were spiritualists. They definitely didn't fall into this category. Now the fact that these men could not honor the request of Nebuchadnezzar infuriated him because they were on his payroll. Therefore he sent out a request for all the wise men in Babylon to be slain immediately. So the captain of the king's guard, his name was Arioch, he went forth to slay all the wise men in Babylon, and he came unto a Jewish captive, which was also one of the wise men in Nebuchadnezzar's courts, and his name was Daniel. Now Daniel was a true prophet of the living God. When he came to Daniel, Daniel stopped him and said, "Why did this decree to slay all the wise men in Babylon come forth so hastily from the king?" Arioch began to explain to him the whole situation that took place moments earlier in the king's court. And then Daniel requested that the king would give him time. And if he did, he would not only reveal to the king what the dream was that he had, but he would also give him the interpretation of the dream. Now Nebuchadnezzar really wanted to know the dream and the interpretation, so he honored the request of Daniel. And Daniel went with his 3 friends, Hananiah, Mishael, and Azariah, and he prayed with them, and the God of heaven revealed to them what the dream was and also the interpretation. Now that's all the backdrop that we're going to get right now. Now let's jump directly into the vision that is going to prove to us that the New World Order will come into existence and also teach us of what nature the New World Order government structure will be. Are you ready? Pay close attention, because here we go. Starting at Daniel chapter 2 and verse 30, the Bible said, "Thou, O king, sawest, and behold a great image. This great image, whose brightness was excellent, stood before thee, and the form thereof was terrible. The image's head was of fine gold, its breast and arms of silver, its belly and thighs of brass, its legs of iron, its feet part of iron and part of clay. Thou sawest thou sawest until that a stone was cut out without hands, smote the image upon the feet of iron and clay, and brake them in pieces. Then was the iron, the clay, the brass, the iron, the clay, the brass, the silver, and the gold broke into pieces together, and became as the chaff of the summer threshing floor, and the wind carried them away, that there was no place found for them. And the stone that smote the image became a great mountain, and filled the whole earth. This is the dream, and we will show the interpretation thereof before the king." Pay close attention. "Thou, O king, art a king of kings, because the God of heaven hath given thee a kingdom and power and strength and glory. And wheresoever the children of men dwell, and the beasts of the field and the fowls of the heaven, hath the God of heaven given into thine hand, and have made thee ruler over them all. Thou art this head of gold. And after thee shall arise another kingdom inferior to thee, and a third kingdom of brass." Now let's stop there at Daniel chapter 2 and verse 39 and break down everything that we just learned, because it's very important. Now this vision, this prophetic dream rather, that Nebuchadnezzar had was of a statue. And the statue had a head that was made of fine gold. It had breasts and arms made out of silver. It had belly and thighs made out of brass. It had legs made out of iron, and its feet were made out of iron and clay. Then later on in this dream, Nebuchadnezzar saw this stone come flying out of the sky, that it was cut out without hands. And it smote the image, meaning it hit the image in its feet that were made up of iron and clay. And when it hit these feet that were made up of iron and clay, the whole image was shattered into pieces. And then this stone turned into a huge mountain that filled the whole earth. Now in verse 38, we are told that King Nebuchadnezzar was symbolized by the head of gold. That's why it said, "Thou art this head of gold." Then in verse 39 it says, "And after thee shall arise another kingdom inferior to thee, and a third kingdom of brass shall bear rule over the whole earth." Now this is very interesting. If we look closely at verses 38 and 39, something becomes very clear to our understanding. And the fact that comes very clear to our understanding is that all the metals that this image is composed of, these metals are actually symbolic of kingdoms. That's why Daniel let him know that the head of fine gold was a symbol of himself. Nebuchadnezzar was simply the king of Babylon. Being the king of Babylon, it meant that he was the representative of the Babylonian Empire. Hence, the head of gold was simply a symbol of the kingdom of Babylon. Notice in the beginning of verse 39, it says, "And after him shall arise another kingdom inferior to thee." Now silver is inferior to gold, is it not? And we are told there that another kingdom inferior to the king of Babylon, which was symbolized by the head of gold, would come into existence after his kingdom fell. And then it says in verse 39 that a third kingdom of brass would come into existence and bear rule over the whole earth. So once again, simply, these metals were just symbols of kingdoms. Now in contemporary language, or like I would like to say modern day language, we wouldn't say kingdoms. We would say that these metals were symbols of states, political powers, but keyly states. Because a kingdom is, in its simple definition, is just a state that is ruled by a king or a queen. So when we look at these metals, we're looking at states. Powers of states, stately powers. And the first stately power, the first worldwide ruling government structure that we see symbolized in this statue is the kingdom of Babylon in that head of gold.